Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you might be in the world. Welcome to another Acoustic Talk live stream. It's great to have you here. Say hi in the chat and where you are watching from today. I see my good friend Anders has already done that from Sweden. Great to see you, Anders. Great to have you here. I can't see you, but great to have you here. I hope you're well. Anyone else? Chime in, say hi, don't be shy. It's great to have you here. We are, of course, here today to specifically talk about creative, expressive ways to arrange songs on guitar. So whether you're taking an existing song and you're wanting to do something with it to kind of put your own spin on it, if you like, or if you're composing your own music, original music, and you want ideas of how you might be able to arrange it. So you might have a chord progression, you might have some lyrics, you might have a melody, and they're the various elements you'd need for a song. But how would you arrange that, or how could you go about arranging that? There are many ways, so we're sort of covering those areas. I see Willow, great to have you here, Willow. I know Willow. We've got Mark's from London. Willow is from I can't say that, Wyoming. I'm sure I'm butchering that. Great to have you here. And yes, so we're talking about that specifically today in our stream. And I have a very special guest who is going to join us here, Deanna de Cabarrus, who I'm going to bring in right now. How are you, Deanna?
I'm good, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for being here today and giving us some of your time. I know
Not at all. Thanks for
you.
asking me.
You're welcome. We know each other quite well, and we know each other quite well musically. So I know that across your time with music, you've certainly done a lot of writing, which obviously involves arranging and so forth. And you've also arranged existing songs too. So I thought you would be the perfect person to bring in here to address this. And for people here, if you have questions at all, ask them in the chat. I'm going to be keeping an eye on that, so don't be shy. If you've got a question, ask away, and we will address that as best we can. We've got Mohammed here, and we've got Timothy. So great to have you guys here. So Deanna, I'm going to throw it to you. I'm going to ask you, where could we start, or what's an area, if you like, that we could focus on when arranging songs? And have I sort of set that up correctly? You feel free to add anything you want in terms of, what you're going to cover.
Well, I think so we can focus a lot on the words and the melody and the chords in a song, and those things can be the things that we notice first, or that we notice the most. Like, we know if I'm going to write a song, or if I'm going to learn a song, I've got to know what the chords are, I've got to know what the words are. But the arrangement is often what gives it its memorableness and its style and its character. And there's this quite well-known clip where some musicians they cycle through lots and lots of songs that have the same chords. So I think it goes, with or without you, with or without you, oh. And then it goes, can you feel the love tonight? She will be loved. Never mind, I'll find someone like you. So this artist cycles through lots and lots and lots of songs that have the same 4 chords. So there are certain chord progressions, whether you're interested in writing songs or you want to cover songs, they're going to come up again and again. They're popular chord progressions that can sustain a lot of different musical ideas and a lot of different melodic possibilities. And so they end up being very well used. And what's going to give your compositions and your arrangements their character isn't finding the mystical, never been used before chord, as I used to think when I started out. It's giving the best possible setting to the units of music that you choose to combine. So I think sometimes when people first come into contact with the idea that the fundamental building blocks of lots of different songs might be the same 4 chords, either in the exact same order like I just played, or in very slightly different order, it can feel almost a little bit disappointing, like you thought there was more to it than that. Like, how is that magical? But it is still magical. It's just magical in a slightly different way. And if anyone if anyone feels like it's somehow disappointing that music can be boiled down to that, or that lots of pop music can be boiled down to that, I would give you the analogy of the kind of four walls of a house. Is it boring that we have houses with four walls, or do we have them that way because they stand up and can keep us dry and warm successfully? So if we take the house analogy a little bit further, and a chord progression is the four walls of a house that's going to support our melody and give us the right setting, the right foundation for our song. All the arrangement choices are going to be how we decorate the house and what makes one house different than another. So all that said, some of the immediate ways that you can start thinking about how your songs and arrangements are going to sound different, especially if you've just got one instrument, so lots of people are going to be writing or covering songs on one instrument, is the rhythm. So you've got different rhythms, different strumming patterns, different feels. So we could, I'll just give you some examples. So if we have just a very plain kind of quarter note feel, something like Sunny Afternoon by the Kinks, 2, 3, 4, taxman's taken all my dough and left me in my stately home, telling tales of drunkenness and cruelty. Pretty sure I sang the wrong words, but you can hear that very sort of definite 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, that feel. If we went from something like that to a quarter note feel to an eighth note feel, be a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and headed down south from the land of the pines, thumbing my way to North Carolina. Immediately sounds pretty different. I know I moved the capo and I know that does have different chords. It's totally different atmosphere because we've got a different feel, and I'm also not strumming all the notes at once. I'm just playing one at a time. It's a little pick and fingers pattern. And that, when I play that song, I will typically play the verse like that with pick and fingers, and then I'll just use my pick for the chorus, and I immediately have the opportunity to take the dynamic up. It's very simple, but it's very effective. And I think, although I'm going to go through a lot of ideas, some of them might not be practical, but that's something that you can implement straight away. It's always going to sound good. It's always going to give you a lot of contrast between one section of the song and the next. So that was an eighth note rhythm. If we went then to something like, a 16th note rhythm, that might be something like Get Lucky by Daft Punk. Very different again. So all I did there was I played in a quarter note feel, an eighth note feel, and a 16th note feel. The speed of the 16th note is also getting these kind of muted strums in like that. That's also going to give us a different kind of more percussive effect. So you don't need a whole lot of technique to be able to combine those different feels, and that immediately gives you quite a lot of things to play with your whatever chord set you're using. So there's also sort of implied in that is different rhythmic, that's really different rhythmic intensity. This 16th note one has got a higher rhythmic intensity than a quarter note rhythm would have. And changing those levels of intensity in different sections of the song is something that you can easily make use of, even if you're by yourself with a guitar. So if we are using a pick, that's also going to be a heavier attack than if we're just using either our fingers or if we're just playing one note at a time with a pick. So that's a consideration as well. I might be playing eighth notes, quarter notes, 16th notes, but how many notes and strings are sounding at the same time? If I've got fewer notes sounding at the same time, that's going to kind of give me a lower dynamic. It's going to be a slightly different effect than if I've got all the strings sounding at the same time and I'm kind of going like the clappers. So you can moderate what the attack is like. You might, fingerstyle is going to have a different kind of a different attack to pick, and that's going to have a slightly different attack to pick and fingers. You can get into these more kind of Latin type playing styles as well. And it doesn't take a whole lot of time to learn one or two feels. If you imagine having a set of 7 or 8 songs and you did a couple or one like that, it would still give you a whole ton of dynamic in your set. I sometimes have found when I travel to different places or I'm playing in different settings, people can be quite protective of the different musical genres. So there can be a temptation. You might bump into someone who says, "Oh, you can only play Latin styles if you've spent 50 years counting to 4 at the feet of an expert in Cuba." I totally reject that kind of thing. You can absolutely help yourself to any technique that you like. You don't have to be the complete master of that genre to use an idea or a technique from it. So what you can also do, so there I was really looking at different rhythmic subdivisions within all those were in a 4/4 time signature. So there was 4 beats in every bar. It was just a question of how we were dividing those 4 beats. But you can also change the time signature, or you can move between different time signatures in a song. So you probably know the song Wonderwall. That's a good example where we've got an original that's got one kind of character, and a cover. There's a famous cover by Mike and the Flowers. There's a completely different character. So the original has got this quite kind of. I've got the cap on because. Backbeat, the word is on the street that the fire in your heart is out. I'm sure you've heard it all before, but okay, we all know how that goes. Then we have the Mike Flowers version, and he's changed the melody a little bit, and he's sped it up, and he's removed some syllables to accommodate that. Backbeat, the word is on the street that the fire in your heart is out. I'm sure you heard it before, but you never really had a doubt. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. Completely different atmosphere. So there have been some changes to the chords. We still know what song it's based on because there's enough that's similar about the melody and the rhythm, but it doesn't sound anything like it, and it doesn't have the same atmosphere. And so, that's a change in tempo and rhythm as part of how that arrangement sounds different. If we think about Fairy Tale of New York, we've got this slow kind of sentimental. Well, it's Christmas. It's a bit low for me. Christmas Eve, babe. In the drunk tank, an old man said to me, "Won't see another one." And that's in 4/4. Then he sang a song. So you have that verse, and then there's this change in feel, and then suddenly we go into a 12/8. And we get Kirsty going, "They got cars big as bars, they've got rivers of gold, but the wind goes right through you, there's no place for the old. When you first took my hand on a cold Christmas Eve, you promised me Broadway was waiting for me." And so the feeling of the tempo has gone right up. So that's something you can harness as well. You can speed things up. You can change the feel from a sort of 4/4 to a triplet feel, like we heard just then. So all of those things immediately offer you quite a lot of leeway into how you want to interpret something and how you want to develop something.
Awesome. That is great. We do have a question here. So Mohammed is asking, how do I use accents? So would you have a answer to that, Deanna?
Yeah, well, there's lots of ways you can use accents.
Yeah. So maybe.
So So, for example, in the Wonderwall example, the accents change from kind of a jazz feel in the rhythm section to a kind of very indie rock feel. I think you could use accents. I'm assuming that we mean in the accompaniment part. Accents in the accompaniment part. So, I mean, there's some quite simple ideas. Let's say that I was doing a power chord type arrangement of something, and I was just accenting beats 2 and 4. So let me think about. This isn't very different than the original, but so it's. Got my first real 6-string down at the 5 and down 1 2 3 4 1 2. Just accenting the 2 and 4 immediately gives a little bit of propulsion to something that you're playing unaccompanied. And if you really mute the string, that if you did a whole 30 minutes of that, it might get a bit repetitive, but that's something that will immediately give you a certain amount of push. You can choose to accent different 16th note subdivisions. So let's imagine that we've got in Get Lucky, there's a lot of those upstrokes are accented. You could decide on a particular pattern. So let's say I was going to do let's say I was going to do 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E. I think I did the last one wrong. But you could create accents in the instrumental part that either echoed what was happening in the vocal part or formed a kind of counterpoint. You could also take the accents from a phrase of your lyric. Let's say you were writing something and you had written a lyric. All our lyrics have inherent language in them. So, for example, the phrase hamburger is like, so that'd be hamburger. So you could make a rhythm part that echoed the phrasing of a set of lyrics. You could also use accents to create your melody in the first instance. You could just take, you could have a set of 2 bars or 1 bar, depending on how fast your phrase was. You could simply select certain ones from out of those and write notes in. So you could pre-decide where we're going to hear notes. Rather than figuring out a melody and then writing down what that melody is, you could pre-decide, this melody's going to have these going to be the hit points of the melody rhythmically. Feel free to ask a clarifying question on that if that wasn't really what you meant, but those are some ways that you can use accents.
Cool. When you were talking about, feels and things before, a song that came to mind was All My Loving, the Beatles, which has a very distinct feel in the verse versus the chorus. So in the verse, it's like a triplet feel, and triplets to me always have this, they build tension, triplets. It's like kind of pulling back on an elastic band, and when you get out of that triplet feel, it's like the release, if you like. So I think it's something like 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a... So it's got this sort of triplet feel. It's quite difficult to play because it's constant throughout most or fair part of the song. But it's that 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1, all the way through the verses. And then when it gets to the chorus, totally different feel. I'm not going to sing it like Deanna would because I don't want I would do that to you guys. But if you listen to that song, it's got a very distinct, different feel from the verse to the chorus. And so I think it can be effective to change the feel up, during a song as well. Like the example you gave with, who was it with the song you did? Was it Tom Waits or?
The Pogues.
Oh, right.
Although there's some great examples from Tom Waits.
So certainly that sort of thing. And what about you're talking about time signatures? 6/8, 4/4, obviously very different feels. And I always like the use of changing the time for a bar or a small amount of time in a song, just to add that unpredictability. You hear it a lot in Beatles tunes. You hear it a lot in David Bowie, I can think of. What about that? Have you used that yourself, or do you have some
that is
examples
something
where there's time signature changes in songs?
I think what's really interesting about that is that if you're just listening to the song as a listener in the audience, it's never something you notice.
Yeah.
You don't notice it until you're counting it out and learning it. All you kind of are aware of is that you're paying attention. And because subconsciously we very quickly form predictive expectations of what's happening in a piece of music, and that applies to the rhythm. So when there's a cheeky bar that's uneven, subconsciously our level of attention goes up because something hasn't met it wasn't what we expected. So we don't really know why it is that we're suddenly paying slightly more attention, but we are. Johnny Cash did this load. So in Ring of Fire, da na na 1 2 3 1 2 3 4, dun da dun da da 3 1 2. That little part. And he would sometimes make. There's also a bar of 5/4 in that song. So he does those. Those bars come in, and actually in Jackson there's bars of 2/4 that kind of accelerate you into what I guess you would count as the chorus. Get to the end of a section and then you kind of almost fall 2 beats earlier than you're expecting to. And so it helps with the pace and the energy of that song. So those, it can be little changes of time signature that just happen during a bar, but we can also have a whole section that's in another time signature. The Pogues did this quite a lot, so they did it with Fairy Tale New York, and their version of Dirty Old Town, da 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 da, and it's a kind of classic folk tune. They've got a whole section where they change key, and they switch up the feel. I have a song where I've got the verse in 7/8 and the chorus in 4/4, and that uneven quality of 7/8 means that when we get to the chorus, we have a greater sense of release. You wouldn't necessarily know the verse was in 7/8 if you didn't count it, but it's the starting gun echoes on, fires again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And the chorus goes 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Oh, I did this wrong. But it was in the right rhythm. I haven't played that one for a while. So you get this quite big payoff of if you go from an uneven time signature into an even one, of a feeling of release. You don't have to just, changing time signatures isn't the only way to do it, although it is very effective, and people can't quite put their feet on why that difference between the So that is definitely a cool technique. But there's also something else I was thinking about. Hang on a second. What was it?
Well, as you think about that, I think when you said, sometimes or a lot of the time you don't recognize there's been a time change. I think, like, I can think of quite a few songs where I initially just didn't pick the time, that there was something in 7/4, let's say, for example. But I think if the vision of the beat stays the same, but the amount of beats per bar changes, so you still got a time change, right? That's less detectable or less obvious, because you've still got this, let's say, quarter note rhythm. So going from 4/4 to 7/4 might not be as obvious as going from 4/4 to 5/8 or something like that. So I think when the bottom number stays the same, which is the value of the beat in the bar, but the top number changes, which is the amount of beats per bar, it's not as obvious. One I can think of that I just didn't really click was, for a while anyway, a while ago, was Money by Pink Floyd, and that riff. Sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right? 7/4. Didn't even think of that being 7/4. I just heard the riff and just recognized the riff when I learnt it. This was many years ago, but I'd known the song for a while before I'd learnt it. I had no idea. It was like, 7/4. Blackbird was another one, the Beatles. That's got quite a few time changes in it, but everything is 4. So it's 4/4 to 3/4 to 2/4 at different points within the tune, but it's all, it's still that all the way through. But if you listen to the bridge to Here Comes the Sun, which I cannot remember off the top of my head right now, but if you listen to that, the bridge, the middle section, it goes from 6/8 to 5/8 to 4/4, and you can really hear the difference when it goes to that 4 versus the 6/8 or 5/8, etc. So but I think that's a really good way to add a subtlety to the arrangement, like you said, that does make a difference, even if you're not aware it's happening. If it wasn't there, it wouldn't quite feel the same. I think those things are good to consider using.
And I think what's interesting as well is that the chord choices that Johnny Cash uses, or that are in Here Comes the Sun, there aren't tons of chords, and they're not very exotic necessarily, but those little rhythmic things give the song a lot of character. I think that sun, 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 here it comes.
2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Da, 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 da.
Here it comes.
Yeah, I think it's like a 6/8. There's a 5/8 in there, and then into that 4/4, and then back to the division of 8. So it's going from that 4 feel to the 8 feel, quarter note division to eighth note division.
Yeah, and there's a lot of standards as well where there might be a kind of Latin feel in the verse, and then it goes into more straight.
Yeah, definitely. Green Dolphin Street comes to mind. There's a lot of that. So you get that, that's a nice feel, that Latin feel, and then when it kicks into, like, say, the B section, and you got the walking bass coming in, yeah.
So those are all contrasts that we can harness to really good effect when we're playing by ourselves unaccompanied. I think with a lot of the examples we've given for adding or subtracting bars, or having 1 or 2 bars in a different feel, or going to a completely other time signature, it's hard, like, we don't know whether they decided to write a riff in 7/8 for a laugh, or whether they wrote the riff and it was in 7/8.
Yeah.
Well, I think both things are worth trying. Like, sometimes with the da na na down 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 now now in Ring of Fire, the the rhythm change is dictated by what's happening musically. They just liked how that sounded musically. They may not, didn't necessarily set out deliberately it was just a cool phrase. But, and for all we know, that money was the same thing. Like, this is a cool phrase. Oh, it happens to be in 7/8. Oh, okay. But I think it is my 7/8, sorry, 7/4. My 7/8 thing, that came from an assignment I was set at music college many years ago now. We had to write something in 7/8, and I wrote that, and I liked it, and I turned it into a song. So I think it can work both ways. You can set yourself an assignment to come up with something that meets a certain musical brief, or you might come up with something and find that that's what it is.
What about chords? So we're talking about chord progressions and times and rhythms and things we can do on chords, but what about chords themselves? What have you sort of found is good to consider when choosing specific chords, chord voicings, this sort of stuff when arranging and writing songs?
Well, the guitar offers us many wonderful chord possibilities. So most people, when they learn guitar, they start out with the open chords, and that gives us these kind of ringing, sustained sounds. There can be lots of variations on open chords. Can have all these nice different add nines, sixes, sus, all those kinds of things, but we still have that kind of ringing effect, and we can use a capo to have that anywhere we want. We also have the more constrained sound of bar chords. We can play only 3 strings with a power chord. We can play only 3 strings with these triads. We can have these bright sounds up here. We can have just an octave. We've got lots and lots of options. We can have the notes close together like this. We can have the notes spread out like this. We can have a mixture of open strings and fretted notes. We can change how many notes we're hearing at the same time as we go through. So without having to do too much legwork, you can learn enough chord shapes to play the same chord progression around, and you don't have to repeat where you're playing it for about a minute or something. So if I play a G, D, E minor, C progression, I can then do I've got lots and lots of options. So all those considerations of how close together or far away the notes are, how high or low are the notes. So I've got 3 notes that are close together here. They're quite low, so maybe a little muddy sounding. I have 3 notes that are close together here. They're going to be really bright. I might want to have some low notes and some high notes. So something that's very effective is to take, if you're in the key of E or A, you can make use of a lot of open strings. So I could have you get these nice kind of shimmering effects. We can have A, chords in the key of A, we can have chords in the key of D, we can just have the open D, and we can play these little triads. Some of them are going to sound more tense than others. You might like the build-up of tension when you repeat the... You might want to change which open low note you have. All the rhythmic stuff that we spoke about before, we can apply with this kind of idea. Or we can have a kind of deep, sustained lower note. If you've gone through a whole song or you had a chorus section where you were strumming quite loudly, and you went up, and instead you went. Nick, this is a Martin 000. So you can really make use of the sound, the lowest to highest notes that you've on the guitar. If you get into alternate tunings and dadgad and things like that, there are even more different droning and sustained note possibilities. But even just on a kind of standard tuning, there's lots of things that you can do. There's lots of chord voicings that I don't know yet that I'm trying to expand my own vocabulary, because these kind of spread sounds can be really nice. And you can get a really nice sort of piano type feel of low to high. I bet Simon knows some very good spread chords. Simon, have you got one or two for us?
Sure. So in terms of just chords, so something I like the sound of, or a concept that I would use a little bit, but I didn't know the term for this until reasonably recently, which is CESH, CESH, and that's an acronym for, I'll read this, Contrapuntal Elaboration of Static Harmony. So it sounds very complicated, but what it means is that you can have a chord, and instead of changing chord, let's say you've got an A chord or an A type chord for, a length of time, maybe a bar, maybe 2 bars, maybe a little bit more. Let me just enlarge myself here for a moment so you can see my guitar. So you change a voicing in the chord. So there, I'm playing across an A suspended 2 chord. That's my chord. So that was 4 bars perhaps there. So instead of just 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and just staying on that static chord, we have one of the voices, and the voice is just a note in one of the notes in the chord moving. Not necessarily chromatically, but I often find that that's a common pathway, chromatically meaning by fret. So I've got this A suspended 2 chord, and I take the note on the 4th string and move it up a fret, keeping all the other notes of the chord the same. And then I move that note up another fret. And then I go up another fret. So I've got this chromatic movement on the 4th string across the sound of that A suspended 2, which is a really nice sound. And then you might come into a D, and you could, I like 9 chords, it's an add 9 chord, an A add 9, so there's some really beautiful sounds. Instead of just playing A suspended for 4 bars, and then going to your D suspended and your D minor, standard D minor, to A suspended. That's the same progression, but I'm adding movement with inside the progression, if you like. There's something I don't really know this that well. I'll see if I can play a little bit of it. An example of this in a song would be Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. So you got this sort of harmonies there, right? So you've got this movement moving up. It's all across a single chord, right? Same sort of thing. So that's an example of kesh. So I didn't know that term, but I knew that technique. It's all throughout music, and it's a nice way to create movement across a static chord. And another one is I like to use harmonies as opposed to chords. Now, chords are harmony. Harmony is just two or more notes sounding together to create a sound, whether it's dissonant, consonant, or whatever. You can have tension and release and so forth. But you can use common harmonies you find in music all the time that sound really nice, thirds, sixths, and tenths. And I'll give you an example of tenths here, but you can do the same with thirds and sixths. So if I have like let's say let's see, we'll go C. So I've got a C bar chord here. I can take the root note and I can take the E in the second octave of the chord, and when I play those two notes together, I have the harmony of a tenth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They're a tenth apart in the key of C, right? So I can play that tenth. So let's say we had the chord progression C to we just go down A minor, G to F, right? So someone could be playing those chords, and I might choose to play these little harmony on top of the chord to create a different texture while someone's strumming away on the chords, whether they're using bar chords or open chords or whatever. If I want to make it sound a little bigger, particularly if I was playing on my own, I can bring in open strings, right, for a really nice sound. And this is Blackbird, as I mentioned before, is a song almost entirely built on tenths and open strings. So the concept I'm using here is the same from that song. It's tenths for the most part. These are all tenths. And we've got open strings happening in there, and that's more or less continuing to happen throughout that whole song. It works down, beautiful voice leading. The thing is, that song and this concept is quite simple. If you struggle with bar chords, the bar chord I'm using to reference the shape, it helps me anchor it down on the fretboard and I can find it. So you don't have to play the bar chord at all. It's just a visual aid to find the harmony. And you can do it with thirds and sixths inside the chord too. If you go to my YouTube channel, in the last 3-4 weeks, I've released videos on 10th, 6th and 3rd harmony. So if you like that sound, you can explore that further if you want to check that out. But it's a really nice, simple way that sounds really advanced. It sounds quite advanced, and if you think it sounds difficult, it's not. It's so much simpler to do than bar chords, that's for sure. And it's got a beautiful sound. So there are a couple of things that I like to do with the chords. Deanna, perhaps we could talk a little bit here about putting this stuff together. Like, we've got chords and we've got different ways we can play chords, and we could learn new ways to play chords until the day we no longer exist. It's endless, right?
Sure.
Great. So we can explore those things and we can have time signatures and all this sort of stuff. What about ways of bringing it together in an arrangement? So how can we kind of decide or think of some nice ways we could arrange this, whether it be for one guitar, because that'd be a very different story, as opposed to arranging for two guitars, as opposed to arranging with a band, drums, bass, etc. So what are some thoughts there?
I think it still comes down to making decisions about what we're hearing at any given time and what elements we want to foreground in a song and how much musical information is being translated. So there's like less musical information coming through here. There's some musical information coming through there, but there's not as much musical information as would be. So with that riff, there's like a suggestion of a melody. There's a lot of chord information coming through. There's a lot of rhythmic information. There's a lot of musical stuff happening. So when you're adding in other instruments or other parts, whether you're trying to find kind of clever ways to suggest them by yourself, either by playing one off the other, because we have a little bit of musical memory. So if we hear this, and then we develop the part, there's a little bit of a musical echo happening. So there is a sense of things building, even if you don't have any other musicians. But if you do have other musicians, maybe one person's going to hang on to one bit of it and another person's going to fill out the texture. But you're thinking, when you're working out which of those options to pull in, is still going to be to do with how much contrast you want across the different musical elements. So we've talked about the texture, so how many notes we're hearing at the same time, and whether those notes are close together or spaced out. Notes that are close together are going to give us a kind of thicker type of sound. If you imagine a reggae song and you've just got the bass drum and the bass guitar and then a little high pitched kind of, we can hear that musical space in between those things. And that would be a typical sort of chorus groove in a reggae song, and then more things might happen more instruments might come to fill out the texture in the chorus. So that's the texture, that's which octaves we're using, so the register. There might be something, if we're just thinking rhythmically, there might be one instrument that's just kind of stating the pulse, and another instrument might be giving us some colors, like higher up in the guitar, might be giving us some melody, might be giving us some different rhythms that are interacting with the pulse. So those would be some ways you could think about it. You could also think about how let's say we've got one guitar part that's playing quite a simple, straightforward strummed chord part. Maybe another guitar part is playing fills that follow those chords. Or maybe the other guitar part is playing a spread chord that just sort of shimmers, kind of, and has a bit of echo on it. And that's creating a different overall amount of musical information than if we just had those chords by itself. But the decision on how to create those parts might be, how much am I hearing across which musical elements, and where do I want to have contrast? So if I play one kind of a melody over a chord, that's going to, depending, if I limit myself to the notes that are already in the chord, that will sound like more musical information in the same area. If I add some extra notes in, then that's expanding what's happening. And all of those things can help you achieve development in the bits of the song where you want to achieve build. So it doesn't have to be this way, but if we take an example of a typical arrangement where you might want to build into the chorus, maybe you're just going to have one guitar to start with, and that's going to be the lowest dynamic, and maybe you're going to sing. And then maybe halfway around the verse, the other guitar comes in with a little 10th part, like Simon just showed us, something just that gives us a little kind of something like that, that gives us just a little something extra to enjoy. And then once we get into the chorus, perhaps this other part is playing little triads. And that's giving us more propulsion. So now that's taking on a more rhythmic role. So I like to think of it in terms of continuity and contrast. So what things are continuing the same? If my chords are continuing the same through the verse and through the chorus, I'm definitely going to want to have other things that give me contrast, that give me new things to enjoy. So that might be that there's more rhythmic density and there's more happening. It might be that the chords are changing place, so now I've got a different sound. It might be that I am adding more runs. So even if you're one person or you're two people, one way of thinking about your options in guitar can be to break it down into really small units of 2 beats. And you can add those 2 beats together to make a bar of 4/4. And in those units of 2 beats, you can have various kinds of strums. If we were just thinking about 8 notes, you could have 1, 2, you could have 1 and 2, and you could have 1 and 2, you could have 1 and 2, and you could outline the chord 1 and 2, and if I were to take that little arpeggio 1 and 2 and 3 and now I've got something which doesn't sound the same all the way through the bar. I've got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so that's automatically giving me a little bit of interest. The other thing that you can do is, let's say that one guitar is down here perhaps playing some bassier power chords, and we've got another guitar that's up here, with certain chords and certain keys, you can slightly change what we're expecting to hear. So if I play just a little first bit of an E power chord at the 7th fret, and I've got finger 1 on E on the string 5 and finger 3 on B on string 4, typically when we play guitar, we expect the notes to go from low to high. Go down here, notes are going from low to high. But if I'm up here, they're going up, then they go down. And that interruption is like the melodic movement of the notes in the chord is not what we expect. Instead of going da 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 da, it's going da 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 da. That's quite cool as well, and that's something that you combine. That you could combine very effectively on top of another guitar part down here. So yes, shimmers, runs, riffs, broken chords, separating the notes out, adding in little fills that fall onto your fingers nicely. Those are all ways that you could combine two guitars together or more parts.
Yeah, I think I don't think you mentioned this, but I know you would know of it. Is one guitar capo, the other not, is often a nice sound too. So someone could be playing down here in open position. You could capo somewhere else just to get the higher end sound on top, and it's got a sound about it, the capo. It's not the same as playing chords higher up the neck, although that achieves a similar purpose, a similar sound. But the capo has that open chord sound like open chords do when you don't have the capo on. So I've been in a situation quite often where the other guitar player will be capoed, or maybe I am, and you get that subtle but significant difference in timbre between the two guitars playing the same thing. The only disadvantage to that is if you forget the chords in the song and you're looking over to the other guitar player to see what it is, it's going to throw you because they're not going to be playing the same shapes as you. But it's a really nice sound. Anything else out there, Deanna, or?
Yes. So something that we haven't necessarily talked about specifically is, but we sort of touched on it a little bit before, is reharmonizing. So something that I would put under the banner of chords is, let's say you got the chords for a song and you got the melody, and you substitute some of the chords. And when you're covering a song, people are expecting to hear it a certain way. And if you give them what they're expecting and then you switch it up a little bit, they can really enjoy it. So in the Mike Flowers version of Wonderwall, he did this. There's a folk song called Rosemary Lane that I recorded on my last album. And the original, I'm just going to play you a little excerpt of the Bert Jansch original. Bert Jansch was a British folkie in the 60s. I think at that time, the sort of prevailing aesthetic was quite austere. So the tune is in time and in tune, but it's got very little ornamentation. It's quite kind of dry. So I'm just going to play a very short excerpt of his.
Now this maid, being young and foolish, she thought it now for to lie into bed to keep herself warm. And what was done there I will never disclose, but I wish that short night had been 7 long years.
Definitely a maximum of 3 chords there. And the whole arrangement of the whole song carries on like that. It's like photocopying that. When I did it, I added loads of chords in, and I added a run in, and the arrangement was in Dadgad. So I'm gonna play the recording rather than playing it live.
Early next morning, the sailor
I sped it up a bit as well. So, no offense, Bert, I like mine better. Because I like the movement of the runs and the bass. I like the extra jangle. I like the dynamic. I sped it up a little bit. So that when you want to change the chords, a very sort of straightforward way to go about it, if you haven't done this kind of thing before, is to just look what the minor chords are. So for every major chord, there's going to be 2 relative minors, and for every minor chord, there's going to be two related majors that share two notes. So if I went, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, and when I went back, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, you can see it still sounds like it fits musically, but it's not what we're expecting. So it won't always be appropriate. It'd be a bit gloomy to play Happy Birthday in a completely minor key. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. It's going to be a great year and everything that you want's going to happen. So, you know, that wouldn't be a great choice there. But that's a very easy way to give extra life either to your arrangement of a cover, or let's say that you're writing your own composition and you feel like you've kind of heard that section round enough, you're starting to get a bit bored of it, like what can I do? You can swap out one of the chords for one of its relative major or minors or more, and that can be a really nice, easy way to give more life and for us to hear something new and fresh.
Nice. I'm just going to address a question here really quickly that came in before when I was talking about Kesh. So, same thing, Rippiato's called a line cliche, like stereo. Yeah. So, I assume you mean like the this sort of thing, right? So that is an example, at least up until that point, because we've got an A minor chord with the bass moving down until we get to the D, first inversion. So there's not a chord change until here. It's really just A minor to D, but we've got that movement also on top and then down. So yes, I would class that in that category there as well, Tim. Okay, well, unless there's anything else you want to add here, Deanna, we will. I do know you've got something here on offer that you might want to talk about here.
Sure. Have you got the picture?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so this is all the things I wish I had known when I started out writing lyrics. Basically, there are certain ideas about how language works and what effect the ways that we use language and the types of language that we use in different parts of our song and what effect that creates on the listener that are really helpful, and it doesn't take very long to get your head around them, and it really helps you make decisions about which type of language and which words and how to say things in different bits of your song. So if you ever had a crack at writing some lyrics and you wrote a section and then you didn't know what to write next, or you wrote a section and you just felt like it didn't really translate what your initial idea for that song was, there are pretty good reasons why that might have happened, and the ideas in this will give you some insights on that. If you're interested in writing lyrics but you've never had a go but you'd like to, it also gives you some ways to get started. If you have already written some lyrics but you haven't necessarily looked into such a thing as lyric writing technique, or indeed realised that existed, I certainly didn't really realise that existed back in the noughties when I started out, definitely grab it, because it will give you, there's a writing calendar, there's lots of activities for you to do, there's ways for you to think about writing. So I would say that quite a lot of us, when we start something because we're interested in it or because we love songs or because we love music, we can be inclined towards thinking that if we can't do it, or we tried it and we didn't like our result, that we simply just don't know how to do it. Certainly when I was starting out, there was a definite suggestion in the bands that I was in and the scene that I was in at the time that it was a bit mystical being able to write good lyrics, and it was either the thing somebody could or couldn't do, and that is all nonsense. Obviously it's nonsense. So download the ebook, learn how to have a crack at your lyrics and how to fix things you don't like, and be free from any restrictions on your desire to express yourself in song.
Awesome. And I've put the link in the chat for people to click on. You have the QR code there as well. I've also got something here people might be interested in. This is a workshop that I did a couple of years ago. And in fact, Deanna is in this workshop because we were at an event together where we were presenting, and I was basically doing a workshop on how to accompany a singer on one guitar. So very topical to what we're talking about today. And of course, my singing voice is rubbish. So I had Deanna come up and help me out for the class. And we went through quite a few different ways of accompanying, or I went through a few different ways to accompany Deanna singing a particular song. I think it was St. James Infirmary. And, using triads, using various harmonies, building intensity, all specifically for a single guitar, and to make it interesting as opposed to just sort of strumming chords. That's fine, but of course we don't want to be doing that all the time because it gets a bit one-dimensional. So it's a video workshop. It's free, and I will put the link in the chat in a moment where you can download that. It comes with the PDF booklet, which has tablature for the specific examples that I present. But I would encourage you to look beyond that. There's certainly a good starting point, but to look beyond that and to see the concept and take that concept and do something with it yourself. So that is something there that you might well be interested in. So I'm going to just punch that into the chat as well. So those links for both Deanna's lyric writing book, which is free too, I believe, and my workshop are there if you're interested. Thank you, Deanna, for your time today. Great as always. Appreciate your insights into music and arranging and writing, as you've done a lot of it over the years. So thank you for coming on board today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Thanks for your questions.
You are welcome. And thank you, everybody who has shown up live. I appreciate it very much. I hope you've got something from it. And to all those who are watching the replay, I also hope you do too. And speaking of which, once we finish this stream, if you want to watch the video again, the replay of this, it will be available on my YouTube channel. Just go to the channel, click on live, and it will be there. I'm pretty sure it'll be only a matter of minutes after we finish this stream. So thank you, everybody. I hope you have a good morning, afternoon, or night. Thank you, Deanna. And we'll look forward to seeing you in the next Acoustic Talk live stream. Bye for now.